Do not be fooled by the price tag. In Japan, in 2026, the most expensive house you can own is the one that costs you absolutely nothing. For decades, the world looked at Japan as the pinnacle of the future, a land of neon-drenched skylines, impossible efficiency, and real estate that once held the highest value on the planet. We imagined the perfect streets of Tokyo, the speed of the Shinkansen, and a society that seemed to have solved the problem of modern living. That story is still true in the high-end districts of Minato or Shibuya, where global capital keeps the lights burning bright. But away from the famous centers, a different map is emerging, a map of a country that is quietly hollowing out. Today we are looking at the places where the dream of homeownership has transformed into a financial and legal cage. We are revealing the 10 towns and regions in Japan where you should never buy property, regardless of how cheap the listing appears to be. These are the front lines of a demographic collapse where the family home is no longer an asset to be inherited, but a liability that families are desperate to discard. The Akiya phenomenon has reached a breaking point, with nearly 10 million empty homes standing silent across the archipelago. In these 10 specific locations, the real estate market hasn't just dipped, it has effectively died. We are talking about places like Yubari and Mikasa in the frozen north, where the industrial heartbeat stopped decades ago, leaving behind grand infrastructure for a population that no longer exists. We are looking at Okutama, where the forest is literally reclaiming $0 homes just hours from Tokyo, and Nanmoku, a village so old that its youngest residents on many blocks are already in their 60s. From the aging coastal neighborhoods of Misaki to the isolated mountain valleys of Totsukawa, Ono, Ikeda, Shichikashuku, and Hayakawa, the math of survival has stopped working. In these places, a house is a trap. It is a commitment to a town without a grocery store, a neighborhood without a school, and a property that carries heavy taxes and maintenance costs with zero hope of a future buyer. The scary part is not just that these towns are empty, it is that they are still functioning, just without a future generation to replace the people leaving. This is the silent collapse. It is an organized, clean, and quiet end to the 20th century promise of growth. Japan is the first clear map of a future that many rich countries, from South Korea and China to Italy and Germany, are walking toward. Today we are zooming in on the locations the maps want to hide. We are showing you why free is the most dangerous word in the Japanese real estate market. This is the Insider Map, where we look past the tourism brochures to show you the places where the future has already started to break. To understand why you should never buy property in places like Yubari or Mikasa, you have to look at what they once represented. Japan was not always a symbol of decline. After World War II, it became one of the greatest economic success stories in modern history. This was the era of the economic miracle, a time when the country wasn't just recovering, it was reinventing the future. During the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, the towns we are looking at today were vibrant hubs of industry and life. In places like Yubari, the coal mines were the beating heart of the energy sector, bringing in thousands of families and creating a stable, wealthy middle class. Back then, a home in one of these towns was a prize, a sign that you had made it. For a generation, the promise of the Japanese dream worked perfectly. The government poured concrete into every corner of the archipelago, building roads, bridges, and massive apartment blocks to support a population that seemed like it would never stop expanding. People moved from the farms to the factories, creating a massive, stable middle class. If you lived in a town like Ono or Ikeda in the 1970s, you lived in a community where everyone had a job, everyone had a family, and the value of your home only went up. It was the gold standard of the 20th century where the salaryman could rest easy knowing his investment in a family home would secure his children's future. Then the math changed. The shift didn't happen with a sudden explosion, it came slowly, starting with the massive economic bubble of the late 1980s. When that bubble finally burst in the early 90s, it didn't just crash the stock market, it broke the psychological foundation of the country. Japan entered what historians call the lost decades. Growth stalled, and the optimism that fueled the expansion of rural towns and suburbs evaporated. But the financial crash was only the first layer of the disaster. Beneath the surface, a much more permanent crisis was taking root, a demographic collapse. As the economy slowed, the social structure followed. Young people, burdened by economic pressure and a rigid corporate culture, started to delay marriage. Families became smaller, and eventually the birth rate plummeted to levels that could no longer replace the dying population. At the same time, the youth began to migrate. They flocked to the black hole of Tokyo and Osaka, seeking the few stable jobs left in a stagnant world. They left behind aging parents in towns that were losing their economic purpose. This created a massive, top-heavy society where the elderly remained in their homes in the countryside, while the younger generation was drained away. The problem did not arrive all at once. It came slowly. First, the local shop closed because there weren't enough customers. Then the bus route was reduced. Eventually, the local school closed because there were no children left to fill the classrooms. Once the school goes, the town's future goes with it. This is the moment a family home turns into a liability. When the parents pass away, the children inherit a house in a town they haven't visited in years. They face property taxes, maintenance costs, and a market where there are no buyers. To them, the house is not an asset. It is a weight. This is why these 10 places are now no-buy zones. The math changed, and now the map is being redrawn by the silence of millions of empty rooms. The easiest way to understand why you should never buy property in these 10 regions is not to start with national numbers or global economic reports. It is to look at the places where the crisis has become physical. It is to look at the map and see the spots where the silence is loudest. When you travel through these towns, you aren't just looking at old architecture or rural scenery, you are looking at the coordinates of a disappearing society where property has transformed into a financial cage. Take Okutama, for example. On paper, it is still part of the greater Tokyo area, a region that represents the very peak of human density and economic power. But as you move west from the neon lights of Shinjuku, the high-rises vanish and are replaced by deep, quiet forests and winding mountain roads. Here, the local government has established an Akiya Bank, listing traditional homes for $0. A free house in Okutama is not just a building, it is a signal. You walk through these rooms and see tatami mats that haven't felt a footstep in years, and sliding doors that shield nothing but dust. The free price tag is a desperate plea for a new generation to come back and breathe life into a valley that is slowly being reclaimed by the woods. But buying here means committing to a life where the nearest grocery store is miles away and the local school has been closed for years. Moving north to the frozen edges of Hokkaido, the cities of Mikasa and Yubari tell a more industrial story of decay. In Mikasa, the town offers land for the price of a single cup of coffee. Literally a few dollars, just to find someone willing to pay the property taxes. In nearby Yubari, the first city in Japan to officially go bankrupt, the infrastructure is a heavy, polished ghost. The municipal buildings are grand, the apartment blocks are massive, and the roads are perfectly paved, but they were built for a population that has shrunk by nearly 90%. A silent street here is not just a quiet neighborhood, it is a museum of a mid-20th century boom that simply ran out of people. Purchasing property here means inheriting the maintenance of a city that no longer has the tax base to sustain itself. The crisis takes a different shape in Nanmoku, a village in the mountains of Gunma that holds the title of the oldest municipality in Japan. Here, more than 60% of the residents are over the age of 65. The visual signal of Nanmoku is the shutter guy, the traditional shopping streets where every single metal shutter is pulled down and rusted shut. There are no children playing in the parks, and the local elementary school building stands like a monument to a generation that moved to the city and never looked back. In Nanmoku, the young people are often in their 60s caring for the 90-year-olds in a community that is hollowing out from the inside. In towns like Ono and Ikeda in Fukui, or the remote village of Shichikashuku, the government offers free houses and even free land to families with children. But the plots often remain vacant. An empty home is not just a property. It is a sign that the local economy has lost its pulse. Even a free house is a liability if there are no jobs to support a family, no doctors to treat the elderly, and no bus routes to connect the town to the outside world. In Misaki, located on the tip of the Miura Peninsula, the coastal air hits aging apartment blocks where the lights in the windows go out one by one as the owners pass away, leaving no heirs behind. These 10 places, including the isolated mountains of Totsukawa and the shrinking streets of Hayakawa, are all struggling with the same physical reality. They were built for more people than they have left. Every $0 house with family photos still on the walls is a testament to a country that built for a future that never arrived. What makes this list of 10 regions so important is that the crisis they represent does not look like a disaster at first. It does not look like the end of the world. There are no burning buildings, no riots, and no visible chaos in the streets. Instead, it looks organized, it looks clean, it looks remarkably quiet. And that is exactly why so many people miss the warning signs. When a house in Okutama or a whole street in Mikasa hits a price of $0, the economy isn't just resetting, it is breaking in a way that we have never seen before. A shrinking country does not only lose its population, it loses its momentum. It loses the workers who maintain the roads, the taxpayers who fund the hospitals, the students who fill the libraries, and the local business owners who keep the streets alive. Eventually, it loses the collective confidence that tomorrow will be larger or better than today. In these 10 places, from the snow-covered ruins of Hokkaido to the aging mountain corridors of Gunma, the social contract has been effectively torn up. The infrastructure remains polished and perfect, but there is no one left to inherit the debt or the duty of keeping it functioning. This is the reality of a world that chose urban growth for decades and forgot to plan for the moment that growth stopped. We are seeing a physical manifestation of a birth rate collapse where houses are standing with furniture still inside and family photos on the walls, but there is no clear future owner willing to live there. The inheritance trap has become a reality for millions. A son or daughter in Tokyo receives a family home in a town like Shichikashuku or Ono, only to realize it is a liability they cannot use and cannot sell. They are legally tied to a ghost, paying taxes on a memory in a town that is slowly being reclaimed by the forest. This is why you should never buy property in these locations, because once the life of a community vanishes, the land itself becomes a burden that you cannot easily put down. But here is the part most people miss. Japan is not an isolated case. Japan is the first clear map of a future that many rich countries are walking toward. The demographic math that hollowed out these 10 regions is already spreading to maps far beyond these islands. South Korea and China are currently following the exact same curve, and in some cases, they are moving even faster toward the edge. From the rural villages of Italy and Spain to the aging industrial corridors of Germany and parts of the United States, the same shadows are beginning to stretch. The map tells a different story than the one we were told about the 21st century. We were told the world would always be more crowded, more expensive, and more urban. But in these Japanese towns, we see the opposite. A world that is hollowing out. Japan may not be the exception. Japan may be the preview. It is the first modern civilization to face the ultimate question. What happens to a country when it simply runs out of people? The houses are free because the life that was supposed to fill them has vanished. The future arrived early here, and it is a future that is clean, orderly, and increasingly empty. As the forest begins to reclaim the edges of these $0 homes, we are forced to look at our own maps and ask, how many of our own cities are just one generation away from the same silence? Drop a comment and tell me which country you think is next. Subscribe for more maps like this every week. This is the Insider Map and where the future is already breaking.